Hey, my name is Evan Miller. I'm 27 now. 8 years ago, I was just a 19-year-old kid in Cedar Ridge, Tennessee, a small town where the roads turned red after rain, where dairy farms sat scattered along the hills, and where everybody knew everybody else's business before the people involved had time to tell it themselves. I grew up poor. My father died when I was 12. My mother worked nights at the laundry until her back gave out. I dropped out of community college after one semester because we couldn't afford it. After that, I took whatever work I could find, loading crates at the feed warehouse, mending fences for farmers, delivering lumber in an old pickup that died on me at least once a week. I didn't have much, just calloused hands, a beat-up truck, and a love that felt bigger than anything I owned. Her name was Grace Walker. Grace was 18, the only daughter of Harold Walker, who owned the biggest farm in the county. Their house sat on the western hill, white fence, clean stables, a wide wooden porch that looked out over the valley. In Cedar Ridge, the Walker place was the symbol of money and land and respect. I was just the laundrywoman's son. Grace never looked at me that way. The first time we really spoke, I was fixing a broken section of fence on her father's property. It was a brutal, hot afternoon. I had my shirt soaked through and my hands full of splinters when she walked out carrying a glass of cold lemonade. She didn't hand it to me like she was doing charity. She just smiled and said, "You've been at it since morning. Drink before you pass out. Dad'll blame me." That was how it started. At first, it was only short conversations behind the stables, then longer ones by the creek that ran behind their land. I told her about the small construction company I wanted to start one day. She told me she didn't want to spend her whole life being the Walker girl, and she sure as hell didn't want to marry some man her father picked just because his pasture touched theirs. Grace loved me in a way that was both gentle and stubborn. She never minded my muddy boots. She never acted embarrassed when I picked her up in that old truck. She never laughed when I said that one day I'd build a decent house for my mother. I used to think that if two people loved each other enough, it would be enough. I was wrong. One cool evening in late fall, I put on the cleanest shirt I owned and walked up to the Walker house to ask Harold for permission to court his daughter properly. I had no ring, no property, nothing but a promise that I would work, that I would take care of her, that she would never have reason to regret choosing me. Harold met me on the porch. He didn't invite me inside. Grace stood behind the glass door. I could see her hand pressed to her chest, eyes wide with worry. Harold looked me over slowly, his gaze stopping at my work boots. "You think you're somebody?" he asked. My hands tightened at my sides. "I love Grace, sir. I know I don't have much right now, but—" "Not much?" He gave a short, ugly laugh. "You don't have anything." I stayed quiet. He stepped closer, his voice went cold. "Grace grew up in this house, with this life. What exactly are you planning to give her? A rented room? A truck that breaks down every other week? Dinners out of cans? Your love won't pay the bills, Evan." Every word felt like a stone hitting my face. "I can work," I said. "I can build—" "Build?" he cut in. "You can't even build a life for yourself." Behind him, Grace pushed the door open. "Dad, that's enough." He turned on her. "Get back inside." She didn't move. She just looked at me, eyes red. I wanted her to say she would come with me. I wanted her to stand up to him right there. But when I saw her fingers shaking on the doorframe, I understood she was trapped in that house the same way I was trapped in being poor. Harold turned back to me. "You want to prove you're a man? Then go prove it somewhere else. But don't you come back here with empty hands." I don't remember walking down the hill. I only remember the dark road, the cold wind cutting across my face, and Grace's voice calling my name behind me. The next morning before sunrise, she met me at the creek where we always used to talk. She wore an old wool coat, hair messy, eyes swollen from crying all night. "You're really leaving?" she asked. I had a worn duffel bag in my hand. "I can't stay here and let your father look at me like I'm dirt." "I don't see you that way. But I will see myself that way if I stay and do nothing." Grace stepped closer and took my hand. "Evan, I don't need you to be rich. But I need to be able to stand in front of your father without feeling like I'm begging." She started to cry, but she didn't try to stop me. Maybe she understood that if she made me stay, the shame would eat me alive a little more every day. I told her, I'm going to Nashville. I'll work. I'll learn a trade. I'll make money. One day I'll come back. Not to show off to your father, but so I can stand in front of you without feeling small. Grace reached up and took off the thin silver chain she always wore. A small silver key hung from it. My mother left me this, she said. She told me a key isn't for opening other people's doors. It's to remind you that you always have the right to choose where your heart belongs. She placed it in my palm. Keep it. When you come back, give it to me. I closed my fingers around the necklace. Don't wait if it hurts you. Grace looked straight at me. I'll wait. Grace, I'm not saying it to make you owe me anything. I'm saying it because I know what I want. I'll be on that porch with hot coffee the same way you used to stop by before work every morning. A year, 5 years, however long it takes. When you come back, if your heart still knows the way home, you'll find me there. I didn't let myself look back when I walked away, because I knew if I did, I wouldn't have the strength to keep going. Nashville didn't welcome me. The city was too big, too loud, too fast. I rented a small room in a shared apartment with 3 other guys who worked different shifts. The bed was barely wide enough to turn over, and the window looked straight at a brick wall. At night, I could hear sirens and car doors slamming. I told myself it was temporary. I started on construction sites. Daytime, I carried rebar, mixed concrete, hauled debris until my back burned. At night, I watched free videos on my phone and learned how to read blueprints. I kept a cheap notebook in my back pocket and wrote down everything I didn't understand. Most mornings, I woke up before 5, still wearing yesterday's clothes, and went straight back to the job. Every time I wanted to quit, I took the silver key necklace out of my pocket and held it for a minute. When you come back, if your heart still knows the way home, you'll find me there. Grace's words kept me moving when nothing else did. After almost 2 years, I got promoted to lead hand. I learned how to talk to suppliers without getting ripped off, how to keep a crew on schedule, how to fix mistakes before the inspector showed up. 3 years in, I partnered with a guy named Marcus who had a little money saved. We started Miller Renovations out of a rented garage. At first, we only did kitchen remodels and roof repairs on weekends. We showed up on time, did clean work, and didn't lie about costs. Word spread. By year 5, the company had real money coming in. I bought my mother a small house on the edge of Nashville with a washer that didn't sound like a tractor. I paid off every bill we'd ever owed. I got a newer truck. I hired 2 full-time guys and finally stopped sleeping in the work van. Year 7 changed everything. We landed a contract to renovate an entire apartment complex on the west side. It was the biggest job we'd ever taken. For 12 straight months, I lived on coffee and 4 hours of sleep. When the final payment cleared, I stood in the finished lobby and realized I had made more money in that single year than I had in the first 26 years of my life combined. I had done what I said I would do. I was no longer the broke kid Harold Walker threw off his porch. But I still hadn't gone home. I kept telling myself I was busy. The company was growing. My mother needed stability. There was always one more contract, one more meeting, one more year that would make the return easier. The truth was simpler and uglier. I was afraid. I was afraid Grace had gotten married. I was afraid she had stopped waiting and realized I wasn't worth it. Worst of all, I was afraid she was still waiting, because if she was still there on that porch, I would have to answer the question that hurt more than any insult Harold had ever thrown at me. Why had I let her wait 8 years? I moved into a high-rise apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked over the whole city. I bought a watch that cost more than my first truck. I ate at restaurants where the menu didn't show prices. People shook my hand and called me Evan, like we'd known each other for years. The same people who used to ignore my emails now wanted to have lunch. None of it filled the quiet. At night, after the building went still, I would stand in the kitchen and look at the lights spread out below. I would think about a wooden porch in Cedar Ridge, about the smell of coffee Grace used to bring out when I stopped by before work, about the way she laughed when I stole bites of apple pie cooling on the windowsill. I would take the necklace out and hold it until the metal warmed in my hand. The night I finally decided to go back, it was raining hard. We had just signed another big contract. There was a dinner, speeches, too many glasses raised in my direction. People kept saying I was at the top. I smiled, shook hands, said all the right things. When I got home, it was almost midnight. I loosened my tie in front of the mirror and looked at the man staring back. The suit fit perfectly. The watch caught the light. My face looked older, sharper, like someone who belonged in that apartment. My eyes were empty. I opened the drawer beside the bed and took out the small wooden box where I kept the necklace. The silver key was still there, a little dull from years of being carried in pockets and hands. 8 years. I had spent 8 years trying to become someone worthy of a girl who had already loved me when I had nothing. I sat down on the floor with my back against the bed and held the chain in both hands. For the first time in a very long time, I let myself cry. The next morning, I called my operations manager and told him I was taking time off. I canceled 3 meetings. I packed one bag, got in the truck, and pointed it east towards Cedar Ridge. I didn't call anyone. I didn't send a message. Some returns have to happen before you lose the courage to make them. The drive back to Cedar Ridge felt both familiar and completely foreign. The highway gave way to 2-lane roads. Tall buildings disappeared behind me. Green hills rolled into view, then wooden fences, open pastures, and the old gas station with the faded diner sign where my mother used to take me for pancakes on my birthday. My truck was too clean for these roads. The tires kicked up red dust that stuck to the paint. I turned the music off and rolled the window down. The smell of wet grass and earth after rain hit me so hard I had to grip the steering wheel tighter. When I reached the turn that led up to the Walker farm, my hands started shaking. I stopped the truck in front of the gate and sat there for a long minute. I had faced difficult clients, million-dollar negotiations, and men who wanted to sue me. None of it made my chest feel like this. I got out and started walking up the hill on foot. Each step pulled me backward in time. 8 years ago, I had walked down this same path with a cheap duffel bag and a broken heart. Now I was walking up it in leather shoes that cost more than my first 3 months of rent in Nashville. Yet the feeling in my chest was exactly the same. Then I saw her. Grace was sitting on the porch. She wasn't the 18-year-old girl in my memory. She was 26 now. Her hair was longer, tied loosely at the back of her neck. Her face had grown quieter, calmer, but her eyes were still the same. In her hands was a white coffee mug. Next to her sat the old wooden chair where her father used to sit the night he threw me off this porch. I froze in the middle of the yard. Grace looked up. The mug stopped halfway to her mouth. For a few seconds, the whole world went completely still. I wanted to say her name. I wanted to walk toward her. Instead, my knees gave out. I dropped down onto the red dirt, hands braced on the ground, and started crying before I could stop myself. 8 years of holding it in, the hunger, the exhaustion, the nights sleeping in the truck, the fear, the shame, all of it came out at once because she was still there. She was still sitting on that porch. Grace stood up slowly. She didn't run. She walked down the steps one at a time, like she needed to make sure this moment was real. When she reached me, I couldn't lift my head. I kept my eyes on the dirt between my hands. "I'm sorry," I managed to say, voice breaking. "Grace, I'm so sorry. I took too long. I was stupid. I thought I needed to be rich enough, good enough, worthy enough." She knelt in front of me and placed her hand on my cheek. "Evan." I looked up. My vision was blurred with tears. Grace was crying too, but she was smiling. "You're late," she said softly. "I've had to make fresh coffee so many times I lost count." A sound came out of me that was half laugh and half sob. I reached into my jacket pocket with shaking fingers and pulled out the silver necklace. The key was still there, a little darker than I remembered. I held it out to her like an offering. "I kept it the whole time." Grace looked at the necklace. Fresh tears ran down her face. "I know." "You couldn't have known." "I knew in my own way." I placed the chain in her palm. She closed her fingers around it, then reached out with her other hand. "Come on," she said. "Stand up. Come inside and have some coffee, then you can tell me about the last 8 years." I took her hand. It wasn't soft the way I remembered. There were small calluses on her palm and short, practical nails. I realized that while I had been building a company in Nashville, she had been carrying this place on her own. That thought made my chest hurt even more. We walked up the porch steps together. Grace poured coffee into the same old white mug she had used the very first day I worked on their fence. I recognized the tiny chip on the rim. She set it in front of me. "You still have this?" I asked. She sat down across from me and looked out at the fields. I kept a lot more than you probably think. The coffee was strong and hot, exactly the way I used to drink it when I was 19. I wrapped both hands around the mug and stared at the steam rising between us. For the first time in 8 years, I wasn't sitting in a glass tower looking down at city lights. I was on a wooden porch in Cedar Ridge, and the woman I had left behind was sitting across from me like no time had passed at all. Except everything had changed. Grace didn't ask why I had taken so long. She didn't ask what took me 8 years. She just waited, the same way she had waited every morning on this porch. I knew the story she was about to tell me would hurt. I also knew I had no right to ask her to protect me from it. I took a slow sip of coffee and looked at her. "I'm here now," I said quietly. Grace met my eyes. "I know." We sat in silence for a while. The only sounds were the wind moving through the trees and the occasional creak of the old porch boards. I could feel the weight of everything we hadn't said yet pressing between us. But for the first time since I left, I wasn't running from it. I was finally ready to hear it. Grace didn't rush into the story. She refilled our coffee cups and looked out at the fields for a long time before she started speaking. Her voice was calm, almost quiet, like she had already lived through the pain and was only reporting what remained. After I left, her father was furious for months. He forbade anyone in the house from saying my name. He told her I would forget her within a year, that I would find some city girl and never come back. Grace didn't argue, she just kept living. The first year she still checked the mailbox every afternoon. Nothing came. By the second year she stopped walking down to the gate every day, but every Sunday morning she still made 2 cups of coffee. One for herself, one she left on the porch. "I didn't know if you were still thinking about me," she said, "but I didn't want my promise to die just because you went silent." I couldn't look at her when she said that. I had written her so many letters in my head during those early years. I just never sent them. At first because I was still poor, later because I was ashamed. The longer I waited, the harder it became to explain why I had stayed away. In my mind, my silence was me waiting for the right moment. In her life, it was 8 years without an answer. In the 3rd year, her father had a mild stroke. He didn't die, but he became much weaker. Grace took over running the farm. She learned the books, paid the workers, negotiated with suppliers, and fixed the mistakes her father had left behind. People told her she should sell off some of the land and live easier. She refused. "This is home," she told them. "I'm not turning it into a vacation spot for rich people from Nashville." I looked out at the fields. She hadn't just kept the house. She had protected a piece of the town's soul. Her father changed slowly after the stroke. Proud men don't learn how to apologize easily. But as he grew weaker, he had to watch Grace do all the things he once believed only a man could do. He watched her keep the farm alive. He watched her turn down every good marriage that came her way. And every Sunday he watched her still put an extra cup of coffee on the porch. One afternoon, not long before he died, he called her to his room. "I was wrong about that boy, Evan," he told her. Grace's eyes turned red when she reached that part of the story. "What else did he say?" I asked. "He said he had mistaken being poor for being worthless. He said if you ever came back, I should tell you he was sorry." I gripped the coffee mug so tightly my knuckles went white. Her father died in the 6th year after I left. I had spent years imagining the day I would return rich and successful, standing in front of Harold Walker in a tailored suit so he would have to lower his eyes. When Grace told me he died carrying regret, all the revenge I had pictured suddenly felt empty. The man I wanted to prove myself to was already gone, and the woman who had always believed in me I had left waiting in silence. Grace continued. After her father passed, several men started coming around. The manager at the local bank, a young doctor who had just moved to town, a widowed farmer from the next county. They were decent, respectable. They offered her a stable life. "Did you ever consider saying yes to any of them?" I asked, even though I was afraid of the answer. Grace looked out across the pasture. "There were days I was tired," she admitted. "Days I thought maybe it would be easier to have someone beside me, someone to help make decisions. Someone so the whole town would stop looking at me like the girl who was waiting for a ghost." My chest tightened. "But you didn't accept any of them?" "No." Because of me? She turned to face me. At first it was because of you, later it was because of me. I realized I didn't want to marry someone just to stop being lonely. I could have loved again if my heart had wanted to, but it didn't. It kept leaving one chair empty on this porch. I couldn't hold it in anymore. Grace, I don't deserve you, she answered softly. Maybe not. But love doesn't always start with who deserves who. Sometimes it starts with who is willing to become better after realizing they were wrong. That night I stayed. Grace made a simple dinner: grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. We ate at the old kitchen table. I told her about Nashville, about the early years sleeping in a cramped room, about the first real job, about the company, about my mother, about the nights I stood on my balcony and missed her so badly I couldn't breathe. She listened without interrupting. When I finally told her about the letters, 96 of them, one for every month I was gone, she looked at me for a long time. You wrote letters? I nodded. Every month. But I never sent them. I kept thinking I would wait until I was more successful. Then the longer I waited, the more ashamed I felt. In the end, those letters just became proof of how much of a coward I was. Grace was quiet for a while. Do you still have them? Yes, in a box back in Nashville. Then I want to read them one day. They'll make you angry. Maybe. They'll hurt. I've already been hurt, Evan, but if those letters are part of the truth, I want to know. Later, when it was time to sleep, Grace brought me a blanket and a pillow for the old sofa in the living room. Are you planning to disappear again tomorrow? She asked. I looked at her. No. She studied my face. This time when you say it, are you sure? I'm sure. She nodded. Good. Then get some rest. Coffee will still be here in the morning. She turned off the light and went upstairs. I lay on the sofa in the dark, listening to the crickets outside and the familiar creak of the old house. For the first time in 8 years, I wasn't sleeping in a place that felt expensive and empty. I was sleeping under the same roof as the woman I had left behind. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what tomorrow would bring. I didn't go back to Nashville the next day. One night turned into 3 days, then a week. I called my operations manager and told him to take over the active projects. I was still the owner, but for the first time in years, I let the work wait instead of letting it decide where I had to be. Grace didn't let me throw money at everything right away. When I mentioned hiring a crew to renovate the entire house, she looked at me like I had said something foolish. I don't need a new house to replace the old one, she said. The porch is rotting in a few places. Then fix the porch, don't tear it down. I understood. That porch wasn't just wood. It was where Harold had humiliated me. It was where Grace had waited. It was where I had finally come back. If I replaced it with something expensive and new, I would be erasing the years she had protected. So I fixed it myself. I removed the damaged boards one by one and replaced them with wood that matched the old color. Grace sat in her chair with coffee, occasionally pointing out when I was getting something slightly crooked. We laughed more than we had in 8 years. The laughter still carried some weight, but it was lighter than before. A month later, I took her to Nashville to meet my mother. Mom held Grace for a long time and cried without saying much. She had always known about Grace, even when I didn't talk about her often. Mothers usually know where their son's heart is. After that, I brought the box of letters from Nashville. There were exactly 96. We started reading them on Sunday mornings on the porch, one letter each week. The first one was written after only a month away. The handwriting was messy, the paper cheap, and there were faint water stains on it. Grace, today I had dry bread and a cold can of beans for dinner. I miss your apple pie. I miss the sound of you laughing. I don't have much to tell you except that I'm still alive and I still love you. I'm not sending this because I'm ashamed. But if you ever read it one day, please know that the first day without you was the longest day of my life. Grace cried quietly while I read. I tried to stop, but she put her hand over mine. Keep going. So we kept going. Some letters were about small wins. The first real raise, the first crew I managed. Some were only a few lines because I was too tired to write more. Some were full of hope. Some were full of doubt. Together they proved that even in my stupid silence, the love had never died. It had only been buried under pride and fear. Grace said, I'm not going to forgive everything in one day. I know. Sometimes I'm still going to be angry that you let me wait so long. You have every right. Sometimes I'm going to ask whether you came back because you loved me or because you finally got tired of the city. I looked at her. Then I'll answer as many times as you need me to. She nodded. Good. Then we start again. Not from where we left off, from where we are right now. I loved her more for that. The love we had at 18 was a promise made under morning light. The love we had at 27 was sitting together and looking honestly at the damage, then still choosing to stay. I used my money the way Grace wanted. We didn't build a big new house or buy flashy things. Instead, we created a small fund to help young people in town learn trades: construction, farming, mechanics. I opened a modest workshop next to the old warehouse and started teaching basic skills. Grace used part of the land to start a community garden and a weekend market for small local farms. I want the kids here to know they don't have to leave to have value, she said. I looked at her and understood she was also speaking to the 19-year-old boy I used to be. A year after I came back, I asked Grace to marry me on that same porch. No expensive restaurant, no oversized diamond. Just a spring morning, hot coffee, the old chairs, the smell of damp earth, and soft sunlight on the fields. I got down on one knee, this time not because my legs gave out, but because I wanted to do it right. Grace, I said, I used to think I had to go far away to become someone worthy of you, but you taught me that a person's worth isn't in their bank account. It's in the promises they keep. I kept loving you, but I didn't keep the time. I can't give you back those 8 years, but if you'll let me, I want to spend every year I have left right here. No more running, no more hiding. Grace cried, but she was smiling. Do you know how long I've been waiting to hear that? 8 years? No, she said, since the day you came back. Before that, I was waiting for you. After that, I was waiting for you to be brave enough to stay. I laughed through my tears. So, is that a yes? She held out her hand. It's a yes. But you have to promise me one thing. Anything. From now on, if you're scared, say it out loud. Don't turn silence into another 8 years. I slipped the ring onto her finger. I promise. We got married in the fall, right in front of the porch. My mother sat in the front row. More people from Cedar Ridge came than I expected. Some of them had once laughed at me. Some had told Grace to forget about me. That day they were quiet when she walked down the porch steps in a simple white dress. At the vows, Grace said, I didn't fall in love with you because you came back rich. I loved the poor boy who looked at me like I was home. And I love the man standing here today because he was brave enough to admit he was wrong and chose to stay and make it right. I told her, I can't promise I'll make up for the past, but I promise I won't use the future to run away again. Every morning with coffee, every evening with the way home, I'll be here. After the wedding, we didn't go on a honeymoon right away. The next morning, Grace still made coffee. I still sat beside her on the porch. We read letter number 41 together, the one I wrote in year 4 when the company finally landed its first big job. In that letter I had written, I thought once I had enough money I would stop being afraid. But today I realized money just makes the room bigger. The fear is still sitting right in the middle of it. Grace leaned her head against my shoulder after we finished. Good thing you finally stepped out of that room. I looked at the fields in front of us. Sunlight touched the white fence, the red dirt road, and the wooden porch that had witnessed both our leaving and our return. 8 years was a long time, I will never say it wasn't. But some kinds of love, if they're still honest enough to come back, humble enough to apologize, and patient enough to heal, can grow again from the place you thought was lost forever. I left Cedar Ridge to find my worth. In the end, I found it exactly where I had left it, on a wooden porch, beside a woman who still made hot coffee every morning. And in the gentlest words I had ever heard, you came home late, but I still saved your place.